a brand new day, and we'll be making history. Are you with me? Won't you stay? We have come so far. This is who we are. And like the rising sun, we have just begun to play our part. This is the time we form the chorus. Lift your voice for those before us. We can rely on one another. Feel the pride, let's show our colors. We are heroes and dreamers. We are restless believers.
Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. This is Gail of Gaia, and this is Free Range, where we graze on wild ideas, and we have wonderful guests. And I have a wonderful guest with me today, and we're going to talk about some very interesting subjects with what's going on. And we may even move to a censored platform if we need to, but we'll try to keep it as straight as we can, or keep it on the show. We'll also have Dot Connector will be on, and let me bring on Frank Jacob. Hi, Frank.
Hi, Gail.
I'm so happy to have you on. And I'll bring Dot Connector on if you have something. She will be in the chat, but sometimes she has a good comment to make. So please feel free to do so. Now, I wanted to talk about what you and John Nolan had talked about at one point in time, because I thought it would be fun to share it with my audience. We have a slightly different demographic type audience. Okay. And you talked about synthetic spirituality, or another way, fake Christ consciousness. Shall we put it that way? Another way.
Synthetic Christ consciousness. Yeah, I think that was how it was called. Yeah, or synthetic spirituality.
Okay. So could you explain that? What do you mean by that?
Well, a little backstory maybe is, I was at the time, I was delving into some research, relative to the New Age movement, a lot of it. I mean, because I've been noticing, an urgency behind the information getting out there, the truth getting out there. And that's, one of the things that's sort of a passion of mine, is to try and mine down to the real essence of something. And it sort of follows the principle of almost Zen Buddhism, where you kind of mindfulness, where you follow where you're trying to still your mind, and so you follow the thoughts, the little voices, to their origin, to find out, is their source pure? Is it from a high place? And most of the time, you find that your belief systems and your ideas come from third, fourth, fifth, hand sources of information. And then I stumbled on an article by an investigative journalist called John Kleincheck, who has like a Substack, I think. And he was, I think it's Unlimited, or something like Unlimited Hangout. I don't know, I forget what they're all called. Unlimited Hangout, maybe, whatever. But I found this article, and I thought it was interesting because it was talking about transhumanism relative to what he was calling synthetic spirituality. And he was tying in, a kind of one of the major figures in the sphere of awareness and consciousness. And that was the late Barbara Marx Hubbard, who was the wife of the brother of L. Ron Hubbard, and the daughter of the toy maker Marx Toys, which was the largest, at one point, largest toy making company on the planet. So, obviously a very, very well-to-do child, grew up, probably never missed a meal, went to Sorbonne and all the important universities, and, got into the upper crust of the upper circle of people. And, and you realize, for me, a lot of the, in my own judgmental way of looking at it, spirituality is something that isn't dependent on your income level and your affluent, your financial affluence. In fact, a lot of people that are very, very poor, or people that don't have any money at all can often go into spirituality and really get far because they don't have the burden of the money behind them. So I thought this article was interesting because it was talking about the idea of this synthetic Christ consciousness, and I pursued the article, and there was a lot of links. And one of the things that irritated me about it was that they were talking about Barbara Marx Hubbard's connection to heart math. And the reason it irritated me is because I know the people at Heart Math, or at least I know some of them. And we made a film called Solar Revolution, in which we featured Heart Math, and we featured there's this heart brain cohesion, this movement that they have, this idea of essentially reaching a global coherence. They called it the Global Coherence Initiative. And they had all these devices set up all over the world to register kind of the heartbeat of the planet. And really high-tech stuff here. We're talking about the tying in of, they have their own Schumann resonance reading devices, so they can pick up on, they're reading the Schumann frequencies, and they're tying it into these huge, we featured them in the film. And so I thought, come on, like, they didn't seem like they were, people that had any kind of nefarious agenda. And it may well be that the majority of the people that are in the organizations know nothing about that. But what was interesting is this investigative journalist, Glidechek, he took the source material of, what they were into with this Global Coherence Initiative, and he made a very strong case, and showing quotes and really, like, hard to deny information about how Barbara Marx Hubbard was a sponsor of the Global Coherence Initiative and Heart Math in general. And many of the people that are some of the larger personalities in the world that are teachers out there, people that, like, for example, the Three Amigos, like we talked about with on Inspired, and I respect them too, because I'm connected to them as well, right? I'm connected to all these people because I make films in the consciousness area, and it's a small world, and I'm an editor and I'm a producer and a director, and a lot of times people reach out to me or us, and with my partner Tanya at Screen Addiction, to produce things for them. And that so I was, in many cases, I'm intimately connected to the material of a Greg Braden or of a Joe Dispenza, because I've produced their talks and their videos, and I know the slides, and I know it better than they do, because when you're editing the stuff, you have to watch it like 3 or 4 times before it's done. So it's like you're in there, done that one, Anyway, so where I'm going with this is that the backstory is that this article kind of traced the source of this information all the way back to the Rockefellers. So
no wonder.
Right. I mean, it leads all the way to their funding organizations. And those organizations are the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. And here, and in the article, he was actually quoting Barbara Marx Hubbard's, words about, with great gratitude, thanking, Lawrence Rockefeller. If without him, none of this would have ever happened, because she's created her own foundations, which are all about something that they base it on, their whole idea of this consciousness, this whole Christ consciousness thing. And so, but if you realize that the source funding of their idea of consciousness and evolution goes back to the people that right now are, really, the Rockefellers are one of the prime culprits in terms of founding the pharmaceutical corporations in America in the middle of the last century.
They put
pharmaceutical, the whole pharmaceutical business rose on the backs of the Rockefellers, and all the way from what's taught at universities. And how you'd ask yourself, how would the Rockefellers have anything to do with what's taught at the universities? Well, they do, because they funded a lot of the universities at the turn of the century and into the second of the 20th century. And they basically put money into these educational facilities so that they could actually sit on the board and have a say in what is being taught at that university. So the natural conclusion would be, hey, we've got a good business here. We've got to figure out a way to take all of these, products we have and funnel them into health via pharmaceuticals. And so they, this is how they established the credibility of the pharmaceutical industry rose on the backs of the Rockefellers, you could pretty much say in a nutshell. And the reason people take them seriously now is because it's been ingrained into several generations, 3, 4, 5 generations of educational protocol based on pharmaceutical truths. Most people don't know the background. They don't know the background of the curriculum of the university that actually came out of the Rockefellers. So this caught my interest. And so the whole thing, you realize then, the question was with John that we posed was, here's Joe Dispenza and Greg Braden and Bruce Lipton pitching the heart and tying the heart math technology into their talks. And, we're talking about right now moving into an era of transhumanism, which is on the cusp. In the next generation, the idealisms and the goals and the dreams, the wet dreams, you could say, of these globalists are going to be the realization of transhumanism. And some of their prime people that are pitching it are people like Yuval Harari, Ray Kurzweil. Right? Ray Kurzweil is really big because he's heading up the technological arm of Google, where they're developing, artificial intelligence. And their idea, and Kurzweil's wet dream is, he thinks, and so does Yuval, that the human body, the human biology is inherently flawed, that it is an inferior, limited system because you have this problem of death. And, Kurzweil, I remember reading years ago, things like he was saying, and what a bummer, you grow up and you get smart and then you got to die and you lose it all. So we've got to find a way to fix this problem. And so the way to fix it, of course, is not to teach people that you can, our natural biological systems have inherently tools within them to prolong life a lot longer than we've been told. Like, the average age of Americans, what is it now, 65 or something like that? Some people get 90, some people, whatever that median is, it's around 60, 70. And so that's how people have this life expectancy of 60, 70 years. But what they don't realize,
it's gone down recently too.
Well, it's going, and it's been going down because of other reasons, right? So what you realize, and for a long time in my life, for about close to 20 years of my life, I was deeply involved in nutritional aspects, learning about nutrition, particularly in conjunction.
I got that back on totally.
Yeah. So in conjunction with my work at the Ann Wigmore Foundation, Ann Wigmore was kind of a pioneer in something called the Living Food Lifestyle, where she taught people about wheatgrass juice and sprouting and seeds and, and fermenting foods. And, it was a very high level form of vegetarianism for cleansing your system. People would come to her foundation, Hippocrates Institute in Boston, which is where I met her, to heal, to detox their system. And she would talk about most illnesses out there are causes of deficiency and toxification. And the toxification is coming from what people are getting in the mainstream food system. And if people buy their foods at regular mainstream grocery chains, well, you find out that a lot of foods are full of preservatives, artificial colorants, flavors, enhancers, preservatives of all kind. And those are in turn derived from products developed by, big surprise here, the Rockefeller-based kind of infrastructure, right? Where they kind of, at some point, it even dawned on me that a lot of the toxins that they were developing as byproducts when they're developing fertilizers and things like that, they were expensive to have to properly dispose of. So they found a really clever way to dispose of them, and that they just relabeled them as natural supplements, and they put them into the food chain. And so they got, not only did they not have to pay to dispose of them, but they actually got paid money to put them into our food system. So I spent a long time researching that and realizing that a lot of the foods in the mainstream grocery system are contaminated. And of course, what does that do? when your body becomes contaminated, it leads to premature aging. It leads to disease, discomfort, right? And
Errors
so
in
that's why,
metabolism and
right,
nutritional deficiencies and
exactly.
absorption issues, and
Nutritional,
it goes
everything.
on and on.
You seem to know what you're talking about. So what I'm saying here is that this, it's all relative. So you never heard the curriculum of the universities and the doctors. And I had many doctors come do workshops with me when I was teaching the living food lifestyle for a while, that were amazed because they had spent 4 hours in university learning about nutrition. They had 2 or 3
The
classes and that
bane
was
of
it.
my career.
Right. And so they were surprised and shocked at what I was telling them about nutrition, and realizing that you could unlock all these, potent qualities in foods that I'd been taught from, my exposure to people like Ann Wigmore. And this wasn't coming out, and this is not what the pharmaceutical industry is about. This is not what the university curriculum is about. And so here you had all these Barbara Marx Hubbards out there. Now going back to tie it into that, is they were talking about this evolutionary leap in consciousness. But if I looked at them, they're all like, they don't look healthy. They're obviously not practicing the kind of disciplined diet that would create, a very purified body that would maybe make them reconsider some of their ideas. No, it was all about, this whole shortcut way, which is using technology instead of using the technology of biology in our bodies and the natural form of converting information via foods and the environment into information that our body can use to fortify its immune system and to nourish and replenish its system and rebuild its cells. No, it was all about taking the proper supplements, which are usually very expensive, and then using some kind of technology, some kind of soft tech to create what they call heart-brain coherence. And, I'm a musician, so I guess I have the advantage that if I want to achieve heart-brain coherence, I just pick up my hang drum and I try to create something. And immediately I'm doing heart-brain coherence because I've got frequencies and harmonics, which are creating feelings and emotions, which affect my heart. And I have mathematics because I have to keep a good rhythm on the thing to make it sound like something. So that's a great way of doing, brain heart coherence, but it doesn't require any technology whatsoever. And I wasn't hearing that in any of these messages of all these people. So I've always stayed away from technology. And you realize that, just staying away from it for a few decades doesn't mean it's going to go away. It's somehow people didn't catch on to the more difficult way of self-discipline and feeding yourself properly. Instead, the whole market of supplements blew up and mushroomed. And the whole new age community, kept coming up with all these teachers that were teaching, ways to kind of reach this enlightenment, but they always were missing some of these prime aspects of it. So for me, that article kind of hit a nerve. And so I decided to kind of use that article as a foundation for a discussion with John on that show, which got us into a lot of trouble because, I'm so attacked by people that like, oh, how could you say that about, Greg Braden and the Three Amigos? Those guys have changed my life. And obviously they weren't listening to what we were saying. We weren't saying they're bad. We never did.
Exactly.
In fact, we're fans. We're fans because they put out good information. But the problem that always bothered me about, this is my own personal opinion here, put that on, out there as a caveat. It always bothered me being someone that at very early age kind of woke up and realized that it isn't just about feel-good woo-woo stuff to raise consciousness. It's also about looking down the deep, dark hole of corruption out there, which is stopping and preventing society from being healthy on a whole as a society. And you can't, tackle just the individual and get healthy and whole and sound if you don't tackle the other problem, the other illness out there, which is the greater extension of yourself, which is your community, your, the city, the country, the nation that you live in. Nationhood is an extension of selfhood on a larger scale. And if we're all one, then nationhood can translate into a form of individuality with respect to a region or a country. And if the nation is corrupted with very sick politicians and, evil-minded, bureaucrats that are all about greed and money, etc., then how are you, what good is it then to be an enlightened individual in a toxic society? In fact, I think you'll agree, and many other people have agreed with me before when I've put that out there, that if you're a healthy individual spiritually in a sick society, you'll have a lot of opposition. You'll have people attacking you. you'll have people in your way, and you have to learn to deal with that. Or if you can't navigate that, you'll go under, because a lot of people that are, reaching kind of self-sovereignty and spiritual awakened states, they have they're vulnerable. They've made themselves vulnerable. And if you haven't got this kind of healthy way of processing this attack coming at you from sick society, then you'll go under. So I felt that was always missing in the Three Amigos information. I thought it was cool what they were teaching, absolutely interesting, fascinating scientific facts. And I love the idea of bridging scientific information, because I'm not an anti-science person. I believe in the scientific method, the real one. Not the one,
the money trail one.
Pay me enough money and then you'll get your science. Yeah. Not that version. I like the real science version. So I love what they were doing, bridging science, real science, with spirituality. And they've done a lot of good in the world with their information. And that's never been in question here. But what came into question was their affiliation with organizations which seem to have this connection going back to these nefarious funding sources. And, I'm sure, I'm just surprised. Unfortunately, we can't have Barbara here to discuss it with us, to tell us, so why, when you were, sort of, kissing the ground of Lawrence Rockefeller in your forewords of your books, were you just doing that as a marketing thing because you wanted the cash and you were trying to take the cash from a bad source and move it into a good source? Or were you totally ignorant of their involvement in blocking spirituality and blocking nutrition and blocking natural healing methods, and even killing and routing out actual healers and technologies that have emerged in the course of the rise of the pharmaceutical industry? And, we can never, unfortunately, have that debate, but we put that debate out there because we were saying, look, where do you stand really? And now in 2022, it's not the same as it is in 2002 or 2012 even. We've reached another level of information exchange out there. And I've probably talked probably way too much right now. Maybe you should sort of jump in here.
No, I enjoy listening to you, Frank, and I'm right there with you. I agree. And I am glad that you and John did what you did, because I still see the elephant in the room that is not being addressed. And I have issues with that. I think they have a responsibility to their audience and to their listeners to put that forward, even if they have to do it in a very cryptic manner, because I'm sure they're worried about losing their funding or losing their many followers or what have you. And I can tell you one thing, that I have wanted to be able to attend one of their seminars, or one of the right here where I live in Sedona, and they're so expensive I can't even afford the registration fee.
Wow, really?
When it's $800 or just to walk through the door, I have a problem with that.
Well, yeah, I didn't realize it had gone that high, but it's true. I remember, I was cutting, the Paris conference, Greg Braden was in Paris, and there was over 1,000 people in that room. And I know they all paid, roughly, we're talking in those amounts of money, right? And I started to, you can't help but start doing the math, because, when you're doing your own talks and you're doing it on a voluntary basis, and people hold out a hat, at the end of the night, and some people put in $5 and others put in 20, and you walk home with a couple $100. You're going like, all right, I made a couple $100 tonight, or if you're lucky, maybe 400. Like, wow, or I sold some DVDs,
Musician,
but then
right?
Of course, you can't help. Yeah, you can't help thinking, 1,000 times 1,000. That, for one night, that's not bad, right? And they do it all over the place. So I don't want to, and I'm happy that people get to make money. I'm all for capitalism in the sense of, you're entitled to profit on what you've invented, and you should be able to prosper from that. But what I do have a little bit of questioning about is when it gets to the point where, and this is where I love, like when John Lennon broke off from the Beatles and he and Yoko were doing these peace ends, as they call sit-ins. They reached a point where John Lennon was making so much money on his record sales, which you could equate to book sales, that he decided never to charge another dime when he did a concert. Because how many limousines and houses and couches and
Can you
whatever
use? Yeah.
can you use, right? Can you, and how many
Really.
percents of suits can you
Why
put
don't
on?
they?
I mean,
None of them ever
at
start
some
giving
point,
any of it
I
away
mean, and
either.
I charge money for my things too, not nearly on that scale. But I mean, at some point, I think you have to kind of like give something back. Everyone has that point where they know. And I think that was another thing that in the course of my, research over the years, I remember reading when I came to Germany about philanthropy, and that in Germany, the Germans are extremely stingy. Like, the Germans will not be a philanthropist until they have about 20 million in the bank. I remember reading this.
Oh my
And
God.
Americans, by contrast, as soon as the first million's in the bank, they start thinking about, hey, what could I do to, get involved in some kind of philanthropy? They want to do stuff. I love that spirit of the Americans, my American brothers and sisters. That shows you there is kind of a line that someone has morally in their mind where they go, I've made a lot, I've succeeded, I'm a big name, I'm never going to starve. It doesn't matter what I do at this point. I can just show up and people will be there. At some point, you kind of have to, in order to get the information to as many people as possible, you begin to, you give away stuff to get it out there. And I know that these guys give away stuff too. Let's not, bash them. I don't want to bash. This isn't a Three
Do they give
Amigos
away
bash.
their time? Do they ever give away their time?
I don't know. I think what they do is they record things and then they give those things away. And after they've maybe made money on them, then they give them away as a recycled product. In fact, I know that I won't mention who it is, but one of those people, I know for a very fact that they charged and now they're giving it away. So they recycle it. And so they do it. They do that. I got to give them credit for that, which is good. And like I say, this isn't about bashing those guys or anybody like Deepak Chopra or something. He probably charges that much too. It's about,
I think they have to take a second look at some of that stuff. I can understand when there are certain costs involved that need to be covered, but on the other hand, where's your heart? Why
yeah,
is a whole
but
raft of people left out of the picture because they can't afford it?
well,
That's what's wrong about
exactly.
it.
It's true. It's like there was a word for that. I was reading about that a few years ago. What was that word? It was like exclusionaries. It's like there's a certain portion of society which is excluded from participating.
Yes.
I wanted to buy some tickets to go see a concert from an artist that I respect that's coming to Munich. And then I went to the site to register and I realized that the price of the ticket's 235 euros for a ticket in a standing venue. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Like what happened to the idea of like paying maybe 50,
Wow.
60 bucks for a ticket, to get a
Yeah.
good seat? It's out the window. The things have quadrupled or, and so everything is kind of blown up in terms of, and it seems to be the case, with these people, these teachers that are out there on the upper scala of the upper echelon of teachers like the Deepaks and the, Eckhart Tolles and all these people. They're all in that echelon. And they probably have agents and they probably have, posters and flyers and publishers and everything, that all these people feeding on them in their little ecosystem to cover the cost of their website and to cover the cost of their, their whatever their infrastructure is. And that has a price. I'm sure it does. And I think absolutely all the way for it. But I think what was for me more of an issue than the fact that they make money, I have no problem with that really. But like, let's leave that aside for now. The issue for me was that, a guy like Bruce Lipton, he's a biologist, and what we're talking about and what I was talking about with John on the show was some of the recent discoveries that are being put out there by some pioneers that are really risking a lot to give us that information by breaking down the patents of Pfizer and other companies and showing us that, what's inside this gene therapy. What is
Karen
it? Because
Kingston. Yeah.
Right. Karen Kingston is one of them. And I have to praise her for doing all that she does, And Dr. Anna.
Talk about being brave.
In fact, I'm going to be probably on her show, I think next week. So we're going to talk about all this good stuff as well. And it's about getting that information out there because this is the actual crux of it. People talk about, and Greg answered about transhumanism, which I laud him for taking the time and actually publishing a video and answering. Apparently, we must have sickered through.
He had to.
He had
He
to
had.
address it, but he addressed only this aspect of the transhumanism. And I didn't expect him to say, you know what, I'm all for transhumanism, and I think we got to move the direction.
Yeah,
I
really.
know he's not.
Nobody's going to
I
say
know
that.
he's
Yeah,
not. Nobody ever said you know, what we
he
wanted
doesn't.
to know was there is this difference between, you know, spirituality, a very organic sense of spirituality, and this high-tech synthetic spirituality, which this article, which I was using as my catapult to go into this discussion with John, was about, which is about the idea of capitalizing and monetizing spirituality for an elite group of
Infiltrating.
people. And so, you know, the idea that of transhumanism, it isn't about, you know, we know transhumanism is leading us toward this synthetic world, but what we're not, the thing that many people don't understand about transhumanism is they think that we're going to have these microchips implanted into us, or, you know, Neuralink is out there, they're putting the chips into your brain, and there's this idea of robots that will one day be the carriers of hard drives, which are the downloaded version of your brain, which is Ray Kurzweil's model, to kind of like, they think that your brain, you are here inside of your head. There's nothing out there. There's no soul. That's just a myth. And, you know, you're just a hackable animal. You're just essentially, you're one step above an animal, a chimpanzee or a dolphin. You're just, because you're humans, you have that advantage to take control over all the other, you have dominion over the entire planet because you are the highest version of an animal, but you're still only an animal. And now that science, which has been developed by us animals to a very, very refined degree, has reached such a point where we can actually see the code that makes up our animal side. We can actually hack and engineer and modify that code. And there's ways to do that that do not require chips and these primitive, like, you know, things that are actually, they sounded really like sci-fi and high tech 10 years ago in 2012. But now we've realized, and thanks to, you know, Dr. David Nixon for publishing filmed footage of the construction of nanobots in situ that are creating and building things, something, and Karen Kingston's exposure of the actual places in the patent words and terminology that shows us that we're talking about AI on a nanoscale here. So what we want to know is, anybody who's in the science world or in the tech world, the teachers out there that are teaching about science bridging spirituality, you know, enter the three amigos. They must know about this technology out there. And so my direct question was, my question and my response to Greg was like, hey, thanks for responding, but you kind of docked the question. You bypassed what we were saying. We weren't saying we believe you're into transhumanism. What we were saying is that we're on the cusp right now of the realization of a certain group of people that are going to convert the natural biology of human beings into a form of synthetic biology, and they've got the tech to do it. And here it is, right in front of our eyes. And so if you want to take a stand against transhumanism and you're a
Take
teacher,
a stand.
then you need to take a stand, because I mean, if we don't do it, and you know, Greg and those guys, they've got a way much huge follower base than any, like I do.
Or
And
me.
John does. John's got a big follower base, but it's
Yeah,
not
he does.
nearly the size of these guys's, right? So, and others like them. So we're thinking, if you're a teacher out there now and you're teaching about consciousness, and you know, things like, you know, connecting your brain, you know, to the higher, you know, levels of consciousness, how could you not see this out there? And how could you not be taking a stand now? This is the time to take the stand. When are we going to do it? In 20 years, when it's over, when it's done and they've realized it? Now
Yeah,
is
and
the time we should do it, right?
and humanity is
Exactly.
extinct. And Dot Connector had something she wanted to say or ask or whatever.
Right.
Go ahead.
And I appreciate science. Being a physical therapist, I've studied science all my life. However, just because we can do something doesn't mean
Yeah.
we should do something. There's a
Yes.
morality and a conscience and a spiritual side of our life that we cannot ignore. We are not machines. And the second point I would say, to reiterate what you just said, is it's already happening. We're breathing in smart dust.
We've
They are
been breathing it.
terraforming. They have terraformed the earth to some extent with all the aluminum, the amounts of aluminum in high mountains. It is just awful.
Yeah, they measured it just recently and it was extremely high. And I'd like to add something about here in America that's a little bit different from Europe, in that they have been working on dumbing us down for some time, because the plan was to take America down, and still is. And they have fluoride in the water. They actually scrape that fluoride off the walls of chemical plants. Can you believe that? And they put it in our water. They have to dress up in these huge awful suits in order to even handle it, and they put it in our drinking water, and people believe it's good for your teeth. Are you kidding me? That still is going on. We still have fluoride in our water. We have GMO foods that are saturated with glyphosate. We have the chemtrails, the aluminum. I mean, we are living in probably one of the most toxic environments possible to take this country down, but it's not gonna happen.
No, well, I mean,
It's
yes,
not gonna happen.
you're absolutely
Good
right,
point.
Gail.
Yeah.
And I don't, I choose not to go really that far, and it's not because I'm not aware of all these things, smart dust and these things. I mean, I'm very much aware of them, but I've noticed in my experience of going out into the world since the spring, I'm talking about Looking Glass and timelines and where we're headed, these two timelines. I realized that people are, when you give them some of the information, well, much of the information that I cover, it's hard to swallow for a lot of people. It causes cognitive dissonance. And you don't even need to go all the way to smart dust to make it clear to people that there's this technocratic dictatorship which is quietly creeping into our world, and even less quiet, more or less quiet these days.
True.
That is scary enough. When you start telling people that they're breathing it in, that they're drinking it in, that there's people shedding, this AI parasite, it makes some people feel like giving up, and I don't want people to give up. And the thing is, if it's out there, I mean, we can't at this point. They've put it out there, so the only thing we can do is we can make it safe for future thinkers and for scientists who are solution based, and there are them out there. They're out there. I know some of them that have solutions. Make it safe for them to bring those solutions into the world, so that we can detoxify our system. And I do believe that the human biology is a very, very powerful creator force that isn't necessarily, stored in only our physical body. I believe the blueprint for our biology lies outside of the dimensional, the visible dimensional realm. And actually believe that we kind of that we kind of reign into the matter, and we make use of the atoms and electrons and the rules of the 3D world that we live in to express our soul and our spirits and in physical reality on the earth. So I believe, I want to believe, and maybe I'm wrong, but I still don't want to let go of the idea that we could actually reverse all this stuff. So for me, it's not.
You're right. And actually, that's a lot about what we're about. Our show is exposing certain things. And our listeners are well educated in that regard.
Well, yeah, because the exposure part of it is an important aspect of it. And I really vehemently disagree with people that tell me focusing on the negative manifests the negative. I've never been caught in that ever. And I'm the proof of it. I've been spending time looking at negative stuff since I was 12 years old. And I'm much older now. And I'm still have a vein of, I've still grown consciously. I've still grown spiritually. And I'm not a pessimist. I'm just a realist, and I'm willing to look at the dark stuff, not because I want people to focus on it, because I think if for us to heal, which is what I was saying at the very beginning of the talk tonight, is that for us to understand nationhood as an extension of individuality and being healthy on an individual level means we have to be healthy as a nation. And we can't be healthy as a nation if we have these parasitical elements out there that are blocking technology, that are polluting our food supply and our water supply and our air supply with their corrupted ideologies and technologies and whatever they're doing. They're either doing it purposely or in total blindness. It has the same effect. So we need to look at it, and people need to wake up. Because if you don't look at it and you just think, meditating your way into bliss is going to solve the problems of your nation and by extension the whole world, then there's people out there that are actively evil, that are working to suppress you, to block you, to dominate you right now, right this very second. And they're organized and they have a lot of money, and they don't care if you say you're going to meditate. It's like, go ahead, meditate. They'll just laugh at you, because meditation is only one half of the equation. You do the meditation not to bliss out and leave this place, but you do the meditation to power yourself up so that your body and your mind are in cohesion. And then you can tackle whatever you have in front of you. And that is looking at looking at what's going on in the world, and then trying to, get together with others, and by extension a local community, and figuring out ways to manifest that healthy nation that you're trying to do incrementally, step by step. And there's many aspects to it. There's not just the technological aspect, there's the media aspect of it. So there's a way that we have to get the message out there. We have to talk to people. That's what we're doing with these shows, but we should be doing this on a much larger scale. Unfortunately, we're still doing it on a very, very small scale. If we were lucky to reach 1 million or 2 people, like I can with John, in the course of our talks, after a couple of months, the interviews sickered out to maybe a couple million people and maybe some of their friends. But what is a couple million people when we're living on a planet of 8 billion? That's not near enough to get a critical mass going. So we're living in a time now where we have an urgency to make people aware of the diabolical stuff that's going on and what's planned, and that's a lot of the talks are not, the whole tale of two timeline thing is to make people clear that there are 2 timelines. And one of them is funded and healthy and powerful, and another one is small and let me rephrase that, healthy, and the other one isn't really what I wanted to say here, but I mean, like, they have financial health, they have financial power, they have meetings, they have global infrastructure, they control the media, they control the industries, the universities, and the minds. They control the minds of the young people rising up in the world. And as long as they're existing, and as long as they can do that without any impedance, we don't have a lot of hope, because how are those minds out there, which are being young, impressionable minds, which are being molded by this false doctrine, have any hope of rising out of that and creating a healthy world? So our job is to create a new timeline, which is creating, another version of reality. So we have to visualize it. We have to use press. We have to use information. We have to use technology to get that out there. And we're, fighting against a much larger beast. Let's not make our 2 bones about it, right? This is what's going on. And so we need to get it out there to many people and as many as possible.
And the only way that we can shift this whole paradigm is for the vast majority, as many people as possible, know and get this information. And they are doing everything they possibly can to block it, to take people down. I couldn't post anything for 2 weeks, and I got 2 strikes hanging over my head right now. But I don't care. Even if they take me down, I will just keep going. And, I hate to start over, but I do what I have to do, because that's how important I think it is. And when I look back at this time in history, I want to know that I did something to help.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very commendable what you're doing. And it's just, we all want, all we really want is to get this truth out there. And, I'm not saying I'm the absolute harbinger of truth here, but I make it kind of my mission to filter through the information, to dissect and distract and extract what I do believe is the nearest to the possible version of truthfulness. And I'm more than happy to be proven wrong by somebody and adjust it if they have a good argument, and they can show where I'm wrong, because I don't really believe that it serves anybody to peddle non-truths. And the most dangerous form of this pseudo spirituality out there that is prevalent, unfortunately, in the world is this 80-20 formula, where there's 80% truth and 20% absolute lies. And because people sense truth in their bodies and in their spirit, and they're hungry for the truth, a lot of new age gurus out there are rising to fame and fortune based on that formula, but they're not telling us the 100% truth, because the truth is dangerous, and the truth gets you censored, and the truth gets you blocked. And maybe this is why the Three Amigos and others like them, like
Chicken.
Eckhart Tolle and Russell Brand and all these whatever they're called, Joe Rogan, and even Alex Jones and others out there. They go to a certain point, and then unfortunately they mix in. They either don't go the full distance, or they mix in falsehoods into the narrative. And I often ask myself why. Like, I'm thinking, like, if there's something I want to talk about that's truthful and it's dangerous, I just leave it out if it's going to get me censored. I don't put out the false version of it. It's almost like I feel sometimes people add the lies to their narrative that are really powerful, communicators and people that have followings out there, because it's almost like an insurance policy. It's like almost like they've struck a deal with the devil that said, you know what, I'll add in this mixed, garbage here into the message, just so you know that people will never come to the 100% really truth of what's going on in the world. And they'll feel okay because they'll feel like they're, it's like when people voted for Trump, there was no alternative. And so they felt that Trump was the solution. And, if you look at Trump as the man and Trump, what he says, it's by far a person who's not without flaws and a certain amount of corruption to have risen to that part in the world, in that place in society. So, Trump is like the lesser of two evils. And I'm waiting for a world where we don't have to work with the lesser of two evils. We just work with the real truth and the real shit,
and we
the
need
real stuff.
Yeah. It's like here too, they have this so-called two-party system that needs to go.
The duality of it.
The people, that's who needs to be running things, and we're not. And we haven't stepped up and taken that responsibility, because these other bad guys need to be taken down. Now, they keep telling us, this was a very interesting discussion that Carrie Cassidy and Gene Decode had just recently too, on a round table about why are the white hats dragging their feet. And then they say, well, they're not dragging their feet, they're doing all this, they're doing all that. Make some of it public then.
Yes.
Public.
Yeah. Right. That's a very good point. That whole white hat thing irritates the heck out of me, because these other people on the black hats, they're making their plans clear. They're not hiding what they're doing. They used to, but now they're putting it blatantly right out there.
Right in your face.
And so, like, why is it only them that gets to put, and like, why do we have to keep hearing about these plans that are in the making? The white hats they're working on it. And they're going to come out with a big announcement. And then, you hear that, and then you're waiting for that announcement. And then 2 years go by and you never hear anything. And in 2 years, a lot changes, and you hear this argument that they're playing the game, and you have to play the game. When you're playing high stakes poker, you got to sometimes take a, bullet.
5D chess, that's what they call it.
Right. Exactly. You got to take the bullets, you got to take people down, and some players have to lose out, and you have to take some hits, and you have to spread some lies, so that you can. But I wonder if that's not some satanic form of,
I think it is,
brainwashing that's been put out there. Because, if you were to say, like, if, Joe Rogan, Russell Brand, Alex Jones, Greg Braden, Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, all that one after another decided to say, you know what, we're just coming out with our protest. We know what's going on out there, and we're going to tell our following exactly what we see, how we see it. No censoring, no holds barred. And I don't care. If they take me down, they take me down. And if everyone, you maybe take one down, but if everyone were to do it like a hive mind, like the beehives, the bees work together, they just do it. They have this connection, and we all have that connection. And I'm certain that if, big players began to come out and say, no holds barred, I'm just coming out with it. And I don't care if they take me out, because maybe I'll inspire, the next Joe Dispenza to come out and tell his truth. And then that'll inspire, if he goes down, the next one. And eventually them all going down is only going to make the point more and more obvious.
Obvious.
And
Yes.
so you can do that so far before eventually it's like everyone kind of sees the game here.
Mhm.
And so why has that not happened? And the other thing that I've found is like, why are the billionaires out there, most of them, and some people have told me that there are billionaires out there that are funding the good fight. But I'm like,
Yeah,
okay,
right.
but I don't really personally know many of them. And
I could
have
use some
talked,
help. I could use an
I mean,
angel
like,
over here.
why are the billionaires only really behind all the dirty money? Why are there no billionaires saying, you know what, I'm going to put together an incredible legal team and we're going to start to make public, big ways, little lawsuits, and we're going to start making little bits of truth come out there, because you don't have to necessarily even put yourself on the front line. You can put an agent out there, just like a politician isn't
That's
the
true.
person. A politician is allowed to go into the war zone of the enemy and he's not going to be killed because he's neutral. He's just carrying the flag and the banner and the message of the nation he came from. And the nation could be those behind the scenes billionaires that say, you know what, we're sick of this game. We've got all the money we need. We're going to start putting our little agents out there, and they're going to start putting the truth out there, because that's going to get something moving without us having to wait for the plan. Everyone just sit back and wait for the plan. I mean,
Sit on your
how much
hands.
longer
Yeah.
are we supposed to wait? And the third aspect of it is the alien aspect, right? Everyone
Oh, that's
says the
another whole
ETs
one.
are going to come and save us. They're not going to let the ETs aren't going to let the nuclear bombs go off. Really? Well, how come they let them go off starting in the 50s all the way up? There are over 200, or even more, I think, thousands of nuclear explosions have taken place in our atmosphere, under the ground, above ground, in the oceans. And, I mean, they didn't stop those. Why didn't they stop those? Those created damage too to the infrastructure, right? And those weren't stopped. And so, I mean, the whole idea of the aliens stop coming in to intervene, that also conflicts with what I've been saying about the idea of free will. If we truly have free will, that means we have the free will to screw it up too, because we can't exactly have free will to develop our soul and our spirit as humanity and go through all our trials and tribulations to emerge on the other end of the tunnel in the light as having evolved collectively through all the dark chapters to become an enlightened civilization, only to have that been handed on a plate by us, by some extraterrestrials that said, all right, guys, we see you're not going to pull this one off. So here you go. Here's a couple of benefit joker cards for you to get your way out of the game, to get out of the pickle that you're in, and then you'll emerge, and then you'll be the advanced civilization. But then you'll reach that point, and you'll be saying to yourself, well, we did it, guys. And it's like, well, you didn't really do it, guys. You kind of had like help from the extraterrestrials. So that really can't be the solution either. And if they were going to help us, okay?
No save.
And I know I've been on another rant here, but if they were going to help us, I'm like, what are they waiting for? Are they going to wait until the entire population has been forced to be inoculated by AI parasitical nanotechnology, that they then have a really huge mess on their hand to try and clean that out of the bloodstream of the people left on the planet, the terrestrials? I mean, how long are they going to wait? I'm sorry. I can see it developing around me right now. And it's increasing exponentially. And I'm like, okay, guys, I mean, like, are you really going to wait until like the very end, and there's like the last possible left human being on the planet that
exactly.
hasn't been,
Thank you, Dot.
Yeah, people are dying, like dropping.
Exactly. Dying suddenly.
All died suddenly, right? We all saw that film, right?
Do you want me to share the
share the link? Go ahead.
We're not going to discuss it much, but we will just show the thumbnail, okay?
Then
I mean, that's probably all you can get away with these days, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's just very.
Is it sharing?
Yes. There. Okay. There you go.
That's
how many see 13 million, or almost 14 million have watched it. I mean, that's officially just on their channel. That's not to include all the sub channels that have put it out there. So obviously this has struck a vein with people, and unfortunately there's some misinformation in the film, which is unfortunate, but still by far and large, the information in that film brings it across very clearly what's going on.
And a strong warning that there are some upsetting things, and it's not suitable for children.
Yeah, don't eat it. Don't watch it. Watch it on an empty stomach is all I can say.
Really, it's pretty difficult to watch.
Right
now, somebody came out. I just got to throw this out here, and I don't like to use names, but I'll give you the letters. IP says that those are all clones. that had
Mm-hmm.
that growth in there.
Oh,
I
really?
don't.
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
that that this is a nice way to write off reality, right? And the thing is, I'm questioning a lot of these people, including that letter combination,
Yeah.
because they claim to have certain truths about, for example, history of our planet, but then when it comes to our planet itself, they don't know the history. So I'm like, okay, well, if you don't even know the history of your own planet, then you're not an authority by any means. You're guessing. You're an aggregator of whatever source of information you seem to think you have, which is truthful, and you haven't scanned it and sourced it for its authenticity. Otherwise, there would be no mistakes in your material, or you'd be open to admitting that you're just a hypothesizer and you're not displaying the absolute truth. So when someone comes waving the banner of truth to you, you turn around and run the other direction, because nobody can honestly say they have the truth. We can only say that we're truth seekers. And like I always like to say, I'm just trying to filter through to get to the source of the truth and put out what I found, because we're all kind of like in an open experiment. And some of us are out there to try and publish the findings. That's what I do. I just publish them via films and via webinars and via talks that I do. And I'm just, I'm admittedly groping in the dark like everybody else, because I have a disadvantage. The disadvantage is that I wish I could be a fly on the wall in a lot of these circles of people that are making these plans out there. And one of the things that I found very interesting lately was is it John Lamb Lash? Is his name John, or I know Lamb Lasher is his last name. He's an expert on Gnosticism.
Oh, John.
Is
Is
it
it
John or
Nash?
Jack?
Oh, he's
John
been around for a long
Nash.
time.
I think
Lamb
it's
Lash. Yeah,
he's
he's not a youngster. He's definitely a very he's a
been around a long
psychonaut.
time. Yeah.
And
I know
I
who you mean.
stumbled on, and somebody sent me a link to one of his shows, and I was watching it, and he was talking about the archons, and he made a very interesting point about how the ideas of the simulated universe are actually coming from these archonic sources, the archons. And the archons are because they can't populate the real earth, the physical earth that we're living in, that is not a simulation, but it is a real earth. And they're envious of that earth, and they want to possess that earth, and they want to displace us, who are the inhabitants in living biological bodies of that earth. And so the way they do that is they affect our minds through projection, and they can project ideas into our brains, including the idea of the simulation, that this is all just a simulation, and that there's just, and that includes ideas about the clones and other things. I mean, yeah, there might be clones out there. But I mean, it's funny that it's like you hear a lot of people say the clones out there are the Bidens and the Hillary Clintons, and those are clones. Yeah, but when you see the people in the Died Suddenly film dying, and that are being dissected on the operating table, and you see that those aren't the Hillarys, and those aren't the the Bidens and stuff like that. Those are just normal, insignificant, hardworking people that are innocent victims of their unconsciousness and their ignorance of what is going on in the technology. Those
are the people we're trying to warn.
They don't need to be clones, man. If those people are clones, like, what's the point? I mean, what, you're going to clone a bunch of people that are just regular working Joes that are, watch the football world championship and go to their jobs every day? The clones that are dangerous are the ones that are in positions of power that are steerable. And there may be something to the fact that those indeed exist. But to just write off all of that as they're just clones is absolutely absurd. And it just, again, it's a disempowerment, because it disempowers us from getting into action mode. When you see something that, you should be outraged. And you should be going to your senators and going to your local, health authorities. And like I was doing in my latest live talk, I did one last Friday in front of about 120 people, and they had never heard this stuff. They were riveted for 3 hours. In fact, people were saying they'd never seen a group of people sitting without taking a break for 3 hours, so concentrated, because they hear this information for the first time, many people, and they want to know the truth. They want to know this information. And part of that talk was about, hey, listen, a good question to our Herr Lauterbach, who's the German health minister, who swore an oath on the constitution of the German, there's a German book of rules, which is kind of the provisionary constitution, which was handed to us by the Eisenhower administration in the end of the Second World War. But it's nonetheless not a bad document in itself. And it has, the obligations written into it that the health minister has a job to protect the nation from, biotechnology weaponry, or any other form of potential health hazard threat to our nation. And since we now know from the work of Karen Kingston and from the work of David Nixon and from the work of Dr. Anna and all these people, what they're finding, it's irrefutable. It's in the patents, it's in the documents, it's in the film footage we presented. There's no more an excuse out there to say, oh, we didn't know that was going on. We were all acting in good faith. Like right now, they're trying to go for, what do they call it? COVID amnesty. We didn't know, we were doing our best. Well, now you know. Now you know, and there's no more. You can't take that excuse any longer. It's like, what do the Jehovah's Witnesses say? Now that you've been informed of the gospel, the truth of Jesus, you cannot claim innocence any longer, that you don't know the truth of, the Lord and stuff like that. It's along those lines, right? So the health minister has a very black and white obligation to protect the citizens against such things. And we are showing them that, saying, okay, Mr. Lauterbach, and this is my position, I don't know what the stuff is. You want to tell me what those little robots are building in that thing? You want to tell me what it is? Because I don't know what it is. I'd like to know what it is, man. I'd really like to know what that is. And that you're the expert. You have the job. You've got a whole team of scientists under you that will jump at your beck and call and that are well funded because you got the cash to fund them, to research it and tell me, oh, okay, Frank, yeah, they looked into it. Actually, this is what they're building. And then publish it to the whole country so that they can all say, oh, you mean that's going into our bloodstreams? Well, I don't know if I want to do that because I'm not into that. I'm not sure where that's leading. And I have a right to say to you, no, I don't think I want that technology building something in my bloodstream. Thank you very much, Herr Lauterbach. But you can go take that down the Bach, which is Lauterbach. Bach is the river. You can take that one down the river as far as I'm concerned. It ain't going in my bloodstream. And we have the right to ask those questions. And this is how we get proactive. But we can't do it if we're saying, oh, yeah, they brought that film out and those people with that stuff and they're just clones. That's how you take away.
That's just writing it off like insignificant people.
It's like writing it off, saying that we flesh and blood human beings living in reality that are seeing this stuff and that are documenting this stuff are delusional. And, we're just making it up. It's like we've put it into some sci-fi fiction now, so that it belongs to the blue avian world, and that there's a colony of people that are hiding behind the other side of Saturn that are watching this and hitting us with their mind programming and stuff. I mean, this is how you confuse people and keep people from embracing reality and actually doing something about what they really could do something about, because you can't really take your beef to the blue avians now, can you?
No, you can't.
You can take it to your health minister, though.
Yes, you can.
Right?
Yeah.
Or your senator, or you can take it to them. You can make
school principal, and now they're trying to add that into the flu thing, and so
right.
And what really upsets me, and I, Carrie was jumping on this, and I can't help but agree with her about this, is the White House had the attitude, you can't handle the truth, so we got to give you just a itsy bitsy little bit here and an itsy bitsy. In the meantime, millions of people are dying. What about that? Right. How come that doesn't matter? Right. And you're afraid of shocking people to death? Well, they're walking into their own death because they're not getting the truth about what's being put in them.
Yes. Exactly.
So that makes me mad.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, this is what I'm saying. This is what it's about. That's important for you to get passionate about it. Because if you don't get passionate about it, you're just going to sit back on your butt and figure that, the plan is running and the white hats are going to come and clean it up. They got to. I mean, we've been told this stuff going on in the background, they're going to fix it, right? Are they? Well, I'm the plan B guy. I've said that from the very start. I'm the plan B guy that's the Hopi said, we are the ones we've been waiting for. So I want to be one of the ones that I've been waiting for. So I'm out there with my big mouth and my doubtful perspective and my criticism of the New Age movement and my, calling people out on their stuff. You can call me out anytime if you want. People have called me out and I've responded, and they've retracted, because if I make my position clear, I'm coming from a place of integrity. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to be putting out something which isn't true.
False
But
information
I
or
don't
whatever.
see any way out of this. I mean, I'm waiting for the big mouth politician. Like, there are some out there. Okay, I can't say there's none. And there is stuff happening. Let's not forget that. Okay, let's not talk it all down. Okay, that's another important factor here. Things
Yes.
are moving. Things are changing. I'm seeing things, that in the world that are happening that are indicating there's cracks in the facade. It's beginning to crack. I would like to think that all the work that all of us have done over the last couple of years, putting this information out there, has begun to create some cracks in the foundation. Because if that ain't happening, Gail, I don't know where the hope is going to be. If we aren't making any kind of an impact out there, then it really is hopeless, right? So
Exactly.
let's know that we're making an impact. Let's never forget that we are making an impact, but it's not enough. We can't stop and say, okay, well, we made some impact. Let's sit back again. Let's go on vacation now. We got, they took the lockdowns away, so we can go to our vacations and we can all take off, for the next 3 months or whatever. I mean, those people aren't taking vacations on the other side. They're working full steam ahead.
Full steam ahead, yeah.
And they get to go to the posh resorts in Bali and Saudi Arabia in their private jets and eat caviar and fish dinners and sushi all day long, and living in, get their massages and their hotels and everything first class. That's their vacation. At the same time, they get to make all the deals and the plans in the back rooms that we never hear about, that we should be hearing about, since there are so-called elected officials at these events.
Yeah, and we know how selected those elected officials really are. And that's a whole nother issue that hasn't even been addressed yet. But anyway,
it's technically elected.
Yeah. Lenny D says majority of people don't understand, and that's true, and that's what we're trying so desperately to change. But it's coming from the little people. People like myself, people like Frank. It's not coming from the three amigos or the people who have the platforms or the size to really make a difference.
Yeah.
And that's what makes me mad.
That was the point of the whole thing. And that was the reason John and I called those people out. That's the only reason. No other reason. We don't want to stop them from doing their good work and all that, but we just do think, like, come on, guys, like, don't you think it's time? Where are all the people, like the big names, not just even, those kind of people? Like, what about rock stars? I mean, wasn't rock and roll about, what was it all about? What was Woodstock about, right? Anti-Vietnam rebellions. The rock stars were the rebels. They were the ones that were against the system. And what do we have now? We have a bunch of pussies, who sold their soul to the Illuminati, who are afraid to make a stance, in the world of even rock and roll, where they really, the guys with tattoos all over their body, they want to look like they're tough, right? Because they have so their whole body is full of tattoos, because they're like, hey, I'm a tough guy. I got tattoos.
Is that what it is?
Get out there and open your big tough mouth about what's wrong. And if you don't know what's wrong, then listen to maybe a couple of podcasts that John and I did, or some others, and get smart and do some research and get loud and get uncomfortable for the people out there that are your followers, because they will listen to the rock stars. They will listen to those people, the film directors, the Steven Spielbergs, and all those people out there. Where are they? They should all be up.
They're part of the problem.
What's going on?
Yeah, well, I mean,
that's obviously one of the natural conclusions you draw, is that they are part. If you're not part of the solution, then you really are part of the problem. At this point in the world, in 2022, moving into 2023, the days are over of living in your comfort zone, stashing away your retirement funds, and thinking you're just going to live the rest of your life in a happy holiday island somewhere in your mansion. It ain't going to happen. Those days are over, and it's going to be very, very obvious when this financial system is brought to its knees, which is already happening. And the value of the money you've stashed away, Mr. Big Shot, is going to become about like this, right? And then what are you going to do, right? When you got nothing, and you could have said something, and you could have stopped it from happening. Where were you, Mr. Tattoo, rock star? Where were you, all the people out there that actually could have stood up and said, you know what, we're doing this now. We're stopping it. Here's the line in the sand. This is it. It's over. We know, and that's
Yeah,
what John and I were saying. Where are they? Where are all those gurus, right?
exactly. Well, look at the one.
Why are they not angry?
The rapper. I don't know. I didn't know the name because I don't follow that type of music that much. But anyway, he was out there promote only people that had this were able to come, and then they played all kinds of frequencies, and kids were dropping dead.
Yeah, well, this is what they use frequencies. This is technology. Like I was saying earlier, I mean, there's so much technology. I could freak your audience out, like they'd never want to go outside again. Or in fact, they don't even need to go outside because you can hit them in the houses too. So in fact, right now the German stupid minister here wants to make it smart meters mandatory. And anybody who knows anything about smart meters, just do some research. What kind of radiation they pelt into your system, in your house, through the whole electrical system. It's just, these people are criminal, and they're criminally ignorant. So they're either criminals doing it or they're ignorant. But in either case, it's criminal ignorance, because it's like, it's really, it's not that hard to educate yourself about this information. And you don't have to automatically go to the blue avian distance, like you can, there's intermediate ways, information pools that are more foundational, sound, that are based on somewhat of like, earthly reality here.
Just like the CDC isn't what people think it is. I call it the Center for Death Control. And it's actually a company that see, what people don't realize is, and I think it's this way all the way around the planet, but I know for sure in the United States, where they created the corporate version of the Constitution and the birth certificate and all the crap that goes along with that. But everything's a corporation. The court's a corporation.
Yeah.
The prosecutors are corporation. They're all corporations, and they all are taking advantage of we the people. And until we wake up and stop them, it's going to continue.
Yes. Well said. We have to stop them. We have to wake up and stop them. They're not going to go away on their own. Why would they? Why would they just go away? Because we told them to? No, we have to make it hard for them to exist. We are the ones. This is our planet here, folks. We're the owners of this planet. We're the sovereigns on this planet Earth. We own this place. It's ours, and we got to take charge of it. Only we can take charge. And the majority of us are us. Those, small players out there, the Klaus Schwabsters, they're the minority, and they're weak. If you get them in a one-on-one argument, they would never be able to hold water up against myself or John or any of these people. You could just crush their arguments in minutes, and they would just turn away and run away because they don't want to face it, because they've never confronted reality. They've lived in their little cocoon of a version of reality bubble that they've been brought up into, usually connected to affluence. I mean, how many politicians go into politics poor and come out wealthy?
They all
right? They have houses, cars, gifts. I mean, yeah, this is what it's about, and this is about calling it out and saying, we're done. We need this new earth. This is the new earth. I mean, I think last night was it? Yeah, yesterday I was on a Twitter thing. It was interesting. I've never done that before. But somebody was we were talking about that issue about like, what kind of technologies can we have to create the new earth? And I'm like, you know what? I mean, we don't need any technologies. If you get rid of the banksters and the whole corrupt fiat central banking system in every country and print your own currency interest free, we've done it in Germany before. They did it in Germany in the 1930s. They cleared all the debt. They had no money, no gold reserves, nothing, and they brought the country in the middle of a depression worldwide to the highest level of technology and standard culturally that had happened in the history of humanity in 3 years. They didn't have any technology. They just got rid of all the cancer, so we can get rid of that. We can get rid of the banksters. We don't even need it. And what happens is when you clear away the need for us to be living as slaves, and that one element alone, okay, then that creates this prosperity, and there's a boom in civilization. People's attitudes change, their vibration changes. Instead of being depressed half the time, they're happy most of the time, because they suddenly see hope and they see the world has changed. What does that cause them to do? It motivates them to be better human beings. It happens all on its own. The human spirit thrives and prospers when it's, living in an environment that's safe, that has, ample, that has enough that it needs. It just thrives. And guess what will happen then? That new earth will begin to take root. We will develop technologies that will create new alternative energy sources, or will recapture those that were suppressed from the last 100 years. We will find ways to pull these toxins out of our system. We will find ways to get rid of plastics in the environment. We will get rid of the need to develop toxic manufacturing methods, which are the real problem. Like, forget CO2, the real problem is poison. We will get rid of those things, and we can get rid of
that's
those
what
things.
the word virus means.
Right. And so, this is what the new earth looks like. We don't need technology for that. This is the technology will follow. It's our mindset that will change. And it's seeing that we're enslaved by these banksters. All we have to do is arrest them and say, we're taking over. Sorry, we're printing the money ourselves. How many are there, you guys? Oh, there's 50 of you guys on the board. Well, there's 8 billion of us, so I don't think you have much chance. So
and you're fired.
And you're fired, right? I mean, and that's kind of like, okay, Elon Musk went into Twitter. What did he do? The board was fired, and most of them, the bad actors, resigned anyway. Why would it be any different? I mean, we can use Twitter as an example of what could happen if we did that with the banking industry. We just took over the banking industry, said, well, you know what? That's it. We're done. Our government's going to print its own money. Thank you very much for keeping us enslaved for the last 250 years to develop your wars and your hegemony. But, I think you've had enough time to play. We're going to now change it over to a healthy way of living, and then we're going to print our own money, and we're going to do it our way. And that would be over. And, if the military was behind you, of course, you need that. You can't, because the problem is those people have infiltrated the guns, and that's the dangerous part of them, because there's only a few of them. And we've seen these pictures, all of us, when there's, G7 meetings and Davos meetings of the global, the World Economic Summit, they meet, and there's always an army of goons outside protecting the little, scrawny people on the inside to have their meetings. And that's what keeps them alive. They have the guns. What we have to do is we have to actually, I think what's happening in Brazil is an indication that if the military were to side with the people, it would be over for those cronies. And, how do you do that? These are the problems we got to solve. Like, how do we get the military over on our side? Because we're not going to go out there with our guns, Gail. As much as, it's cool that
I don't want to
Americans
go
have
up
their
against
guns.
the military.
What are you going to do? Run out with your gun and say, all right, I'm going to get... Like, they're just going to send some little drone at you. It'll pop you in the head and you'll be gone. I mean, and they'll do that times 20, and all the people will see what's going on, and they'll all run hiding, and they'll realize they can't do anything against their version of technology. So we have to find a way to motivate. The power is in a country is in its military. Unfortunately, we're not, evolved yet as a planet, to say that we don't need guns and we don't need, we tried that, but it never took root, right? So, disarmament never worked. What people don't realize is Hitler tabled 20 disarmament proposals. They don't realize that. What? I thought he was going to take over the world. And no, it was all about disarmament. We'll disarm if you guys all disarm, and then we'll all be equal. Nobody wanted that. So let's face it, we live in a world that's, still based on military might. And, it ain't bad when you got the military on your side as the people. But right now, it seems to have run amok. And, people have hope in the military. But, I mean, those are the people that have had the juice. They've drank the juice, more so than most people on the planet. Yeah. Anyway, we're talking about some serious red pills here.
Yeah.
So
good,
the media is a big
Problem.
big part of this. And I think in the alternative media, I think we need to critically look at ourselves and say, let's stop this infighting that some of which is going on, and let's group together Let's not compete, but let's come together and get the message out. And
Yes.
ask every one of your subscribers to share to every one of their social media sites. You know, let's just share and share and share, like pay it forward and make it work. And I think that will make a big difference too.
Well, we do have to make some kind of difference, because the very existence or extinction of humanity is in the picture as a possibility, without more change coming forward. And the thing that disturbs me the most is that they this whole program that they went forward with, people were not informed at all. All they were told was everything was safe and effective. The same old bullshit line
Lies.
that they've used forever. A lie.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, and you know, it's interesting.
Don't
It's what's shown in that film is the ingredients. They open that sheet, and you know, it says purposely blank, right?
That should tell you something. You know, the other thing that kind of did surprise me is that he didn't have Karen Kingston on there. I wish he would have, because she has disclosed so much.
Yeah, I know. Which is again, like I said, there was some misinformation in that production. Tanya Maidenford would never have allowed me to get that film out there. That's all I can say. She's all into quality check. She's all into, you know, has to be absolutely, like, you know, all the T's and I's, you know, dotted and crossed. And they didn't do that, you know, unfortunately, and that's what causes a weakness, right? So the film could have been even more powerful. And you
Yeah.
know, and the problem was that the enemies will take those weak points in your production, and they will shoot the whole film down. And people that are dumb enough to accept just those couple of arguments will throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, the level has gone up. You know, the bar has gone higher. You know, for filmmakers out there putting out documents such as these, you got to be more on your game. You know, you got to be tighter with the information, or, you know, disclaim it and say, you know, this is, you know, simulation. The part that I thought was, for me, I don't know, I'm going off on a branch here, but I saw it again recently. Somebody sent me some videos, and it was a video about, you know, somebody who begins to look up in the air, and then they, you know, and if you
Zap.
look at, and they featured some of those people in that production, and that's really so eerie. It's like the question is, what are they looking at? You know, it's like
Yeah, it's like they look up, turn left, and go.
it's like
kind
they
of
look, it's
circle
like
and fall
they're,
down.
you know, and this whole thing about the archons, right? And it's like they're obviously they're tapping in, they see something, and maybe it's in another dimension. Obviously, it's
I didn't
extra
see that.
dimensional. And
Oh, yeah.
they certain people, not everybody,
I
but
sent it to you.
certain people, they see something extra dimensionally. Maybe it's archonic, maybe it's some kind of evil spirits. I mean, we talked a lot
Well-
about that, I showed a lot about that in the Tale of Two Timelines in the webinar. But John and I also touched on you know, what CERN was all about. And CERN, you know, is bringing through something. Maybe that's what it's bringing through. You know, maybe they're bringing through a floodgate of these
Demons
bad players
type.
that
Yeah.
are
That's their
demons.
Demonic.
plan. That's their main plan, is to open up a hole between the dimensions, and it doesn't have to be real big. They just need to puncture it, basically. Once they have that, then they already bring in like extra energy from it and steal from the other parallel universe or whatever. But that's their whole plan, is from the beginning, to fight God, to fight.
Well, what's really disturbing about it is that they're doing the same kinds of things that they were doing back during Atlantis, when they sank the whole darn planet out.
cycles and cycles and
Countrysides are
cycles
doing
and
it again.
cycles. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
And-
we've had the examples before us, right? The playbook's been put out there for us to read. We know how this goes. We know how this ends if we keep going along this direction.
And that's why it's so critical to work on it now, as we're all discussing. You know,
Yeah.
the stakes are.
And
highest
the
they've ever
light
been.
workers and the podcasters and people that are putting out the best truth that they possibly can need to support each other.
Yes. Yes.
Even John could send a few people to my site. You might want to check out this. She just did blah blah blah. Anything like that to help. I know I don't
Yeah.
have a website set up in such a way that it even shows up hardly on Google, okay? Because I don't have the resources to have a webmaster and things like that. All that comes into play.
Yeah,
But
well,
that
yeah,
doesn't mean
you're
you
right.
don't have a lot to contribute. So let's get together. That's the whole point.
Yeah, and this is absolutely right. It's like the same. It's the equivalent of sourcing when you're writing. You need to state the sources. Yeah, and that because not why. Yeah, it adds credibility to you, but secondly, it also helps the sources, because then people that are really interested, they can go to the source material and they can study for themselves. And so I always do my best to put sources with everything that I put out there, because it only helps people. And when I publish these interviews on my Facebook, which is one of my only social medias, really, I don't do much on Twitter, a little bit, but I'm starting to. Yeah, but I always cross pollinate, because I think it's important to spread amongst ourselves to get the information out there.
But like
Yes.
Gail said, it's so important to share and for this community to think about what it's doing and come together with a plan.
Yeah, it's like some of the people have started really super criticizing others, not in the way that you and John did. That wasn't really a criticism. It was just an asking,
Yeah.
and that should be okay with anybody.
Yeah.
You can come and ask me anything about what I'm doing. So that's not a big deal. But coming together and supporting each other, we're seeing people attack each other. I mean, if they're putting out bad stuff, they're eventually going to fall by the wayside. I mean, the truth will put them down eventually. So I don't know what people should do in that regard, because there are some people who do put out questionable information, and sometimes they're on the opposite side. You think they're a white hat and they're actually a black hat.
Yeah, we're going
thing.
to see a lot more of that, I think, in the future. We're going to start to see a lot of these big people, they're going to be demasked, and we're going to see who they really are. I've been told, and I think I read it again just the other day, or I saw something, and it just reminded me of that. I think you're going to start seeing a lot more of that happening. Of the real who are the real actors and who are the phonies. Who are the controlled opposition. Because controlled opposition is a bona fide tactic that's used by the enemy. And why should it be any different in the New Age community or the awakening community?
All right. So there is a question up there, and you've done a lot of work on timelines. Do you think the timelines are still fluid? Is the question.
Yes, absolutely. The timelines are continually flowing together, and they're like constantly looping or interacting with each other. But there is a consensus timeline, and that consensus timeline is made up of a whole plethora of interwoven timelines. And the way we contribute to the consensus timeline is by giving it our resonance. And the way we break free of or to set up a new consensus timeline is to begin to, visualize a new timeline and to work toward realizing and manifesting that timeline, to have an idea of what we want. Just putting those ideas and visualizing is the first step, because it helps to anchor, because you have a certain frequency when you think or meditate or visualize something positive, powerful like that. You actually raise your vibration, your frequency, and you anchor what's called frequency. You're like a frequency anchor. And that's so important. So if we want to have any chance of anchoring in a new timeline, then we have to begin this way, just through, the visualization, the positive visualization, the proactive visualization of a new timeline, while we're also, of course, looking at the bad actors and the negative timeline. We can identify that we don't want to be part of that timeline any longer. And the more we see through it, the more of the bad actors we recognize, the less energy we give it. Like, for example, that topic right there of controlled opposition. Some of us might be, adherents or fans of certain personalities out there we think are disclosing the truth, but those people could be bad actors. And so by giving them our energy, we're actually maintaining that bad actor timeline, giving it energy through our resonance. So we need to start to pull our energy out of it. And maybe part of it is like, there's enough, we've had enough gurudom Maybe it's time to drop, to feel you need to read the next book and there's still something you're missing. Maybe you're not missing anything anymore. Maybe all you're missing was empowerment of your own visualization skills and your own creative inherent ability as a creator being. Maybe you were just missing the confidence that you have in your own self to be a creator being. Maybe it's as simple as that, and use that creativity to visualize that new timeline. And then eventually that other timeline will die off. I mean, the Looking Glass Guardians did say the second timeline is a timeline where en masse people began to wake up and see through it. They smelled the coffee and they saw through the illusion, and the illusion began to crumble. And by 2030, those players were dead and gone, or for the most part, beggars on the street. There wasn't even any vengeance we took on them because we felt sorry for them. Because essentially, once you empower yourself and you step into your own abilities as a creator being, you don't need to spend and waste energy on punishing somebody or taking vengeance. It's all pointless. That just carries on that same negative energy loop.
Yeah, who cares? Just let it go.
Who cares, man? Like they say, the best way to be successful is not to, what is that saying? It's to be successful yourself. Like, you don't need to envy somebody or try to shoot them down. Just be successful yourself, and that's the best form of self-empowerment. And that's what we need to do en masse. We need to just wake up, all of us, and everyone has our own timeline, of course. But the idea of the consensus is, like, I always like the analogy of the plant in the garden. The plant that gets the most fertilizer, water, and sunlight is the one that's going to grow and crowd out all the others. So right now we have a big, ugly, plant in the garden that's, taking away all the sunlight and trying to create this dark, future of transhumanism. We need to get rid of that plant, and that we can only do that by, taking our energy away from feeding that plant and putting it into the other garden that we want to see. We need to visualize what we want. That's how we do it. And we can, and we are very, very powerful creator beings. We just don't know it.
That is so true. And we have been messed with genetically. And now they're trying to mess with us even more genetically to make us even bigger slaves than we were to begin with, which makes me very leery of some of these people who claim to be incarnations of people. But anyway, the other thing that I want to bring up when you're speaking about resonance and focusing on what we want. That's why I brought up this GPMS.world, because that's what that's all about. It's saying what the old way is, what we want the new way, and it's a no-brainer. It really is, because if you read through it, it's what everybody wants. And just consenting to that, the more people that do it, the better it is. I mean, it's that 100th monkey effect, or I don't know if it's that one, but it creates a resonance that puts us in the direction that we want to go, on the timeline that we want to be on. I think. If you don't agree, let me know. And I got something else that I'm going to send to you privately that you might find interesting. About I don't want to talk about it on a show. Okay. So
sure.
Anyway, well, do we want to wrap up here? We're at 1:33 already. I could go on. I could talk to you all day, Frank. We're very much on the same page about things. And is there any final words that you might want to bring up?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've said a lot here, and I think, there's always danger of super saturating people. And, we didn't talk about some of the current developments in the world, and maybe that's not so important right now, but I think one of the things people should be leery of, which is important, which has to do with current events, is something called digital currency. And there's some strides being made right now to invoke digital currency as the final solution to the economic woes, which are also artificially stimulated in the world, which will be the ultimate form of slavery and totalitarianism.
Oh, for heaven's look at, they'll shut off the electricity for your electric cars. They'll shut off the digital money.
See, imagine if they made your money. Imagine if they made your money degradable, like, like if you don't spend it by, it has an expiry date. Imagine having money with an expiry date. If you don't spend it, it'll be gone. But then you can only spend it on, the products that we're offering you to spend it on. You can't spend it on these other products. These are all elements of this digital currency world that are coming our way. So for people that are listening to this interview, part of your homework is to get smart about digital currencies and making sure that you say no to digital currency, because that is going to be, if they get that one through, folks, we're toast. That's all I can say. It's going to be, we feel limited now when they censor us on YouTube and all these social media platforms. Well, guess what? Once they've got their hands on, their grubby hands on our cash, and there's no longer any cash, it's over for all of us. There's not even any way to survive. I mean, if you can't even put food on your table, you won't be doing interviews. You won't even be thinking about YouTube channels or even getting censored, because you'll be in survival mode, or you'll be in flight or fight mode. And that's not a comfortable place to be in. And we don't want to go there. So I would encourage people as their homework to make themselves smart about digital currency, programmable digital currencies, and talk about that with as many people as possible to stop that from happening. And other than that, go check out my Tale of Two Timelines webinar, because that'll fill you in on a big picture of the world as well with regard to timelines and what that means, and the technology that's being used to manipulate us toward one timeline versus the other one.
All right. Well, that would be great. And I have not had the opportunity to see that. I might have to have you send it to me or something. Anyway, Dot Connector, do you have anything, last words that you might want to add? Are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. I did send the video that we did with Rick Jewers to Frank, and I put it in the chat as well on the GPNS and everything it stands for. And that is something that needs good word of mouth in the bigger communities. And in the chat, we're talking about just that, building communities, coming together and using our strengths.
And helping each other.
Yes, because we all have different talents.
We've lost our abilities to really, we're gotten so used to the phone and these other forms of communication that actually person to person, and I hate to even use the word person, but that's a whole nother story. But anyway, man to woman, man to man, woman to woman. We don't do much of that anymore. I live in an apartment complex. I don't know anyone here. That's kind of pathetic.
It's by design too. I mean, in the past 2 years, if you want to call it what it is, post-traumatic mind
stress syndrome.
Yeah.
From the trauma of
isolation combined with technology, then a lot of the people that you're friends with are on the computer or in Germany or Arizona or some state.
far place away. Yeah, in fact, most of the people that I can relate to, that I can talk to, that I can feel free to discuss things with,
that don't think you're absolutely bonkers, right?
Let me tell you, just to start out this conversation, I hope you're okay with dealing with a conspiracy theorist, because that's what I've been called for the past decade or so.
So many years, right? But it's time to do that, I feel. And I do feel like there's a lot of progress in our community. We just can't get down. We can't lose that hope. We've got to encourage each other and lift each other up and shine our light, basically.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. That is so important. And we will keep bringing whatever information we come across that we think will be helpful to you, because we're about solutions, not just the problems. But you do have to be aware of the problems, because the problems won't go away without you being aware of them.
And I'm sorry, I was just going to say one more thing. The Patreon page. Please join our Patreon page, where we are building community beyond this wonderful chat that we already have. And we have some really good ideas about how to give you some solutions in there as well.
Alrighty then. And please look up GPMS .world. And Frank, I would love to have you back again. I love talking to you. You're fun to talk to.
Maybe in the
'cause
new year.
I could keep going here, but it gets to be too long for people. So we'll look at that in the new year, because it's very busy the next couple of weeks anyway. But thank you so much for your time. I really enjoy it when you come on the show and share
so
it.
does the audience. The audience is thanking Frank for his efforts as well.
Thank you very much. It's good to hear that. Well, it's my pleasure.
Alrighty then.
If people want to reach out to me, they can go to my website, by the way. It's listed,
yes.
I think, right there.
Yes, frankjacob.com. It couldn't be easier.
frankjacob.com, and you can get links to films of mine and ours and the webinar and get in touch with me and all these things. Thanks for having me again, Gail.
Okay,
and
thank you.
All the best to you. All the best to you for the holidays and for the new year. And I guess we'll see each other on the other side.
Yes. Okay.
Same to
You
you.
take care.
Same to
Thank
you.
you so
Yeah.
much. Bye-bye.
We have found our way. It's a brand new day, and we'll be making history. Are you with me? Won't you stay? We have come so far. This is who we are. And like the rising sun, we have just begun to play our part. This is the time we form the chorus. Lift your voice for those before us. We can rely on one another. Feel the pride, let's show our colors. We are heroes and dreamers. We are restless believers, stronger than ever. Never say never. Don't look back now, don't look back now. Rise up, stand with each other. We are sisters and brothers, finding our place and running the race. We'll take our chance and seize the moment. Hold on tight and don't let go of all your hopes and dreams that light the way. We control our fate. Destiny awaits. We are all the actors in the stories we create. Hope will be our guide. We'll no longer hide. When we roll like thunder, feel the wonder from inside. This is the time we form the chorus. Lift your voice for those before us. We can rely on one another. Feel the pride, let's show our colors.